Says we are live, and today we're going to be talking about the brain and how we can make our brain better, cognitive skills better. So all of you teachers in the classroom or students in the classroom, Dr. Patrick Porter is back to be our teacher. So before I hit the record button, I want to make sure that you guys are all sharing and the good news, and you are yes, yep, I see us there. And that you guys are inviting your friends and doing your part to help grow the classroom. So I'm going to hit the record button so that we can start our podcast. You ready, Dr. Porter?
I'm ready.
Okay, here we go. Okay, everybody. Today we're going to focus on our brain. What is going on in the brain? There is so much stresses out there. We're going to hone in and tap into what is going on in there and how to improve it with Dr. Patrick Porter of Brain Tap. So fasten your seatbelts because we're going to learn and grow together. Oh, remember, it's time to dance. Here we go.
The Lillian McDermott Show.
We love, we fear, bridges we burn, we make mistakes, then we live and learn. When life gets tough, and it seems like your best ain't good enough. If you're in need of hope, you know where I'll be right here. Right here, and when you need a friend, you can count on me. I'll be right here, waiting for
you. This is the place you can always turn to when you need a friend. The Lillian McDermott Show. To reach out to Lillian, visit her on the web at whenyouneedafriend.com. Now let's all learn together. Here's Lillian McDermott.
Hello, my listening and viewing friends. It's so nice we can meet each other on the air on this beautiful, best day ever. And for those of you who are tuning in to the classroom for the first time, just know I am grateful for you. I've been waiting for you. You know, for a little bit about the classroom, this is a safe place where you can go to when you need a friend. It is my commitment to provide alternative ways to heal, and it is my mission to make awareness, responsibility, and truth a part of our everyday life. And I hope you, my listening, as well as my viewing friends, will feel empowered to embrace a new truth and live the life of your dreams. Now, for a while, you have been hearing me every day talk about Brain Tap. What is Brain Tap? Oh boy. If you haven't heard about Brain Tap, you are going to be razzle-dazzled. This is the headset. I started my day this morning with a meditation that tapped right into my brain. As a matter of fact, the meditation was created specifically for the stresses of COVID-19 coronavirus. And so for those of you who have not met Dr. Patrick Porter, he is the creator of Brain Tap. He is the one that has taken the time to make sure that we can go into this meditative state much more in a deeper sense. And I don't know, we'll let him say what it is because only he can do it as best as he can. So, or better than I can. But just know that we've talked about rewriting our thoughts in our head. This is a great way to get started. And I want to let you all know that if you go to whenyouneedafriend.com and you go to my shopping page, my shopping bag page, it says Shop with Lily, you will find a trial. You don't have to have this beautiful headset. You can have just earbuds and take advantage of it. And we're going to learn about how not only to learn about our brain, but how to improve cognitive skill. And since it is our sole purpose in life to give and receive love and knowledge, I am so grateful that Dr. Patrick, PhD, is here to do just that. Welcome, Patrick, to the Lillian McDermott Radio Show classroom. Uh-oh, I can't hear him now. Patrick, are you
There we
muted?
go. Now I should be okay
There we
now,
go.
right? Okay. Yeah, it's great to be back. Sorry about that. Somehow I got muted. So I'm
Yeah,
ready.
now it's really loud, low. So let's see, Robert, is it just on my end? Okay, so I can't hear Robert either. Okay, so we're gonna press on because I think that maybe your adjustment was good. It was all that dancing.
Yes, I think so.
Okay, well, share a little bit about your background and what got you fascinated on the brain.
Okay, well, first of all, it started at a very young age for me. I was lucky. My dad was an alcoholic. Most people probably wouldn't say that, but because my dad got help, he said, "Wow, let's help the whole family." There were 9 of us. So he did something called the Silva method, and we used machines way back in the 70s. They were called GSR machines, galvanic skin response systems. And what would happen is you could put your fingers on it, and let's say back then we could only go to alpha because we only had sound. So that's what started me, and I started using that to train my brain for sports. And I made my first recording actually when I was 12 years old, when a cassette alarm clock just came out, and that's really what I wanted for Christmas because I put my affirmations on it, and that's how I'd wake up in the morning, was to a series of affirmations that would get me ready for the day. And it's just kind of taken off from there. And I went to school really for electronics, so that's why when people go, "How did you get from psychology to electronics?" It was really electronics to psychology, because I really wasn't going to do what my dad did, but here I am, for 35 years now doing it, and I love it. But I had to incorporate my other love, which was electronics, in there as well.
Well, you've married them very well because everyone who tries the brain tap and the headset, or if I'm at an event and I bring it, or a family gathering and I bring it, people stand in line because they know that there's something very special about this. Now, for those of you who this is the first time that you're tuning in and you did not hear Patrick, Dr. Porter, in the previous class that he did, he talks specifically about the details of what BrainTap does, how, and his background, even more because it was our first time introducing him into the classroom as a teacher. But today, Patrick, I would love to talk about the parts of the brain that we don't understand, that you understand, and that through neuro-linguistic programming, through the methods that whether it's the flashing lights or the far infrared lights in the ears, whatever it is, that we know what its purpose is. And so let's talk about how we can use, how does BrainTap override our brain? How does it mesh with our mind so that it helps us beyond meditation?
Right. Well, the first step is that most people, in fact, would probably be shocked to learn that when they meditate, they actually create a stress response. This is normal. In fact, at AIMS, the All Indian Institute of Medical Science, we're actually doing research against yoga, and they call it yoga nidra, which is a meditation process. Mm-hmm. And almost everyone is stressed out. They ask me, "Why are people registering as being stressed?" And I said, well, that's normal, because with the brain tap, we don't do that because it's more of a dance than it is a force. Most meditations, you have to learn to do it. Now, master meditators don't need to do that. I mean, if you've been meditating for 10, 20, 30 years and doing it correctly, then you can do that. But most people don't go long enough because it takes training. So we're going to do, they commonly call it biohacking now. That term wasn't available in the 70s. But in what we're doing is we're taking what we do naturally in nature. So to give you an idea, our frontal lobe is 40% of our brain. But when we close our eyes, our primitive brain says, shut down the frontal lobe. That's executive functioning because we're trying to go to sleep. It thinks, oh, I'm closing my eyes, I must want to go to sleep. Even if we see a scary thing on a movie or something, we go, wow, that's it's not real. So we close our eyes, and that shuts down that executive functioning. Now, what we do, we call it performance mindfulness, because we want people to perform more mindful. We don't want them to become mindless. A lot of people think, oh, I'm going to go into this meditative state, I'm going to be in a Zen place, and I'm not going to hear anything, I'm going to be totally out of this world. Well, even the monks that they register, like a Wisconsin university, when they were studying the monks and they were producing high gamma, they still heard everything around them. They said, we're not unconscious, we're super conscious. So it's a little bit different. What we see from the outside, it looks like people are sleeping. So the retinal flashing, a lot of people think that's going to keep them awake. They're not going to go into these altered states. The reality is they're just out of phase. So everyone has watched a movie was on film. Now it's all digital. I was watching on television, but at the movie theater, like at IMAX, they have it's whatever, 120 frames per second.
Yeah.
That means there's that many frames. We don't see the black lines between the frames because our brain says we don't need to know that. We only need to know what's in the middle. That's the core. So what our brain does with the lights, because they're out of phase, as soon as your brain's in phase with the lights, which means it's balanced, we don't see the light anymore. So you've probably noticed that when you're doing it, it doesn't seem like the light's as bright, but the reality is that your brain is only using it kind of as a tracker, or what you might call a pace car, like in racing. It's pacing the brain, getting it to do those things. Now we change that every 3 to 5 seconds, depending upon the algorithm we're using, because typically what happens is people go right to sleep, and we don't want you to go to sleep either. We want you to stay in a state. There's 2 brainwave states between being awake and sleep. One is 10 hertz frequency and one is 7.8 hertz frequency. These are magical frequencies. In fact, in science now, we know that when you reach those levels, you get a gamma burst and you get a delta burst. Now, what's important about those 2 things is gamma is associated with high-level creativity, master healers, even captains of industry that can solve problems. They have high amounts of gamma. My brother-in-law, he's a maxillofacial surgeon, he has a lot of gamma because he's got to be not only creative, but he's got to be very logical. He's a surgeon. So what we're doing is doing that. Now the ear lights, let's
go. I want to learn about all of that.
Okay.
And I want to go like step by step, because I loved how you were telling us about the frontal lobe and how that's 40% of our brain. Fascinating that when we close our eyes, that shuts down. What turns on?
Well, we're trying to, basically what's happening is we're trying to shut down. The brain is very efficient. What it wants to do is it wants to conserve energy. So if you close your eyes, it thinks, okay, we're shutting down all essential functions. The part of the brain that will stay operating is the primitive brain, the limbic brain. And that even some meditators, they'll find that they won't even have a heartbeat, but this part of their limbic brain and their glands, the pineal gland, will actually pulse like a heart. I mean, it's so fascinating that we think the heart is the one that's controlling everything, which it does a lot. I mean, we talked about that before. But in our brain, we can from the outside, people have learned to meditate so deeply. In Hindu religion, or over in India, they call it samadhi, which is a breathless meditation. And that's what everybody thinks they're going to get to, but they don't know these people have been meditating for 30, 40 years, and they have a specific technique. And we want to disengage. We want to kind of lose our mind, if you will, lose our everyday mind, that busy mind, the one that's worried about stress or coronavirus or whatever might be going on, because that brain stops us from entering into our state of bliss, our state of relaxation, our state of joy. That's the natural state of the human condition. Everything other than that is something that, like they say that all unhappiness stems from unfavorable comparisons. Mm-hmm. We can't have those comparisons without our frontal lobe. So, and then we have the hippocampus, which is a part of our brain that we know that once you put on the brain tap, you start working, the hippocampus lights up, because that's the part of the brain that takes short-term memories and makes them long-term memories. Now, the only difference between a short-term and a long-term memory, for people wondering about that, it's not how long ago it happened, it's how important we make it. So if we reference it, so most of us remember maybe if you were around in 9/11 when that happened and, the buildings came down. I know I was driving across Lake Pontchartrain on my way to an office I had in New Orleans.
Yeah,
and
I was folding clothes, looking at the news thinking, what is that? Yeah.
Right. So your brain marked that out. And then we also remember the very good times, like maybe the birth of a child or a wedding or a divorce, depending upon how you treat those things. And then the process, what happens is the brain then basically flags them. It's kind of like having the flags we have in our email. It says, I want to go back to this. Now, we might not go back to it for a while, but we've made it important. So now, like beads on a string, we get an experience that's almost like it, but a little different. That experience has an emotional component. that means it's oscillating. It has energy. And that oscillation and energy attracts the other. So like beads on a stream, all experiences like that start to come up. That's why we want to shift the program. We call it frequency switching technology, really. That's when you think about brain tap. We want to turn the channel just like you would on a radio or a TV. If those thoughts are coming in, because once those thoughts come in, they have their own program. We have brain circuits that control them, especially if let's say something really bad was happening to you and you said, I'm going to get even with that person. And you did it with a lot of energy and a lot of, anger and all that. Well, the brain goes, okay, we're going to mark that out because at some point down the road, we're going to need that information. And we need to do that with our good times more than our bad times. But it seems like, if you look at the news and other things, we're kind of programmed to focus on the negative just for survival. That's part of our primitive brain. We care more about how to survive than how to thrive, because if you think about these bodies, 200,000 years ago or whatever, we're just coming out of the caves and wondering what's going on. We didn't know if we were going to live tomorrow. So in that genealogy, they know that those expressions are inside of us and they're acting. Whatever was happening when your mom and dad conceived you, they know you have all the memories they had up to that moment. And they had all the memories of their mom and dad up to that moment and their mom and dad so you're living with a community of experiences that are unconscious to us. Yes. That's why if you ever known anybody or maybe they don't know your parents, but your husband or wife is doing something, go, oh, that's just like her mother or just like her father, because we pick these things up unconsciously. So what the brain's doing, think of the brain more as they call it a servo mechanism, meaning goal striving. So it has a goal, but it doesn't assign goals the way we would consciously assign them. We think that the brain is logical. It isn't. It's a fourth grader. So think of your subconscious. 95% of your life is ran by your subconscious. It's no more educated than a fourth grader. So if you've ever tried arguing with a fourth grader, you usually never win, but if you got to find diplomatic ways to instruct. So we need to get out of that beta brain, which is the frontal lobe is part of that beta brain, but we need to put it into a state of what's called abeyance, which means it's there, but it doesn't have to process all this information out here. Because when we have our eyes open, and this is something I mentioned in the last school classroom, but I'll mention it here for those that didn't hear it. If you've ever been in a lecture and you can't hear the person and you're going, man, I'm drifting off, but then you adjust your line of sight until you can see the lecturer. Now you can hear them. Your eyes control 30% of your hearing, which most people don't know. That's why when people have concussions, sometimes their hearing gets off and things like that because of the what's happening in the brain. So the lights are keeping that part of the brain awake, but we're giving it new information to think about. We don't have to worry about, hey, where's the camera? Where am I standing? Am I balanced or whatever? Hopefully we're laying down, sitting in a chair, doing this meditation, and your eyes are closed. And when you practice, what happens, the nice thing about the brain tap and the lights, it creates a Gaussian field, which means you literally begin to, the rods and cones of vision are being triggered, but there's nothing to focus on. So now your creative mind will create a pattern out of that space. And as you get better at it and better at it, you start visualizing better. And, there's a saying, what we visualize, we realize. Mm-hmm. So if you can start visualizing it, then you'll start realizing it. And then you can practice in the inner fields of your mind instead of making all the mistakes out here in the outer world.
That is amazing. So there's several things that from what you just said, I've picked up on. The first one was the hippocampus. Is that how you call it? Hippocampus. Mm-hmm. Okay. Doesn't that shrink as you get dementia?
Oh yeah. Yeah. The key thing is that's the part of the brain, especially if the two hemispheres get out of sync, which happens all the time. ADHD, ADD, dementia. We found there's one common denominator. There's a lot of common denominators, but the main one for us, because we're dealing with brain waves, is brain speed. So our brain also has a speed. So when we think of memory, like if I asked you to tell me about your favorite memory, you would start to think about it. But it's not just one place. Like a lot of people think, I'm going to go back to this filing cabinet in my brain, pull out this memory. No, 6 to 9 places in your brain light up. And when they light up, your brain is basically representing it. So it's presenting it to you again. And believe it or not, everything that we see is our imagination. because we're getting impulses, electrical and these physical impulses from the world in the spectrum of light and sound that we're in our world with. Our brain interprets it and we create the images and pictures. So it's not unusual for some people to create what's called clairvoyancy because they can see clearly in their mind, like Tesla. Tesla was one of those people that could build motors and have them run and tell you how much wear was on them. So not everyone has that capacity because they haven't trained to it. But the reality is that we're already re-imaging our whole world anyway. That's why the truth is that we distort, delete, and change our past anyway to support our present belief system. So if we get a belief system change, our past seems to change, or it's not so important. Just the reframe that I used at the beginning when I said I was blessed to be the son of an alcoholic, that's a chapter in my book. Because if I said, poor me, my dad was an alcoholic, that would mean I'd have to live out that prison sentence as well. I believe that if I acted like him, did all the things he did, I would probably be a pretty good alcoholic. I don't want to do that. So I'm going to model people that are, he was my dad and he trained and did a lot of great things for me, but I also had other mentors, and I was very fortunate, being in sports, you always had a coach or somebody who was taking care of you. And I still believe in coaching today. I mean, I'm coached every week I have a coach that helps me. And it's good to have that feedback from people because our brain works on a feedback loop. And sometimes if we're just feeding ourselves, sometimes we give ourselves not really good information, And that's what the hippocampus is designed for. So the hippocampus says, okay, I'm going to take and reassemble all that information. So if there's damage there, then there's a problem, right? So, or if one hemisphere, as we grow older, what happens is typically one hemisphere will go out of balance, especially if you're not doing things that we would call whole brain. Like if, let's say that you're not getting out in the yard and walking around, or you're not doing a sport, or you're not playing. You're just doing everything left brain, like maybe you're an accountant, a bookkeeper, and a lawyer. You're just doing all these left brain things. And then your brain says, okay, we don't need all those brain circuits. And the example I use for people is if you speak 2 languages, you have a brain circuit that stays awake. If you only learned one language growing up, that circuit shuts down at 7 years old and is very hard to re-engage, especially the way they teach us in school. That's why immersion courses, like when somebody goes over to France, let's say for a month, and they come back to, wow, you're speaking French. How'd you do it? Well, because they immersed themselves in the culture. Mm-hmm. They were only able to speak that. They challenged their brain. They reactivated that circuit. But like our science officer, he speaks 6 languages. And when we were in India, he went with me because we were doing some research projects over there. And by the end of the trip, he's speaking Hindi because he has that brain circuit, but he's also very gifted at language. So some people have that talent and he does it. So we have a very capable brain, but a lot of people, they think we learn the way we learn in school, which is totally wrong. I mean, most of the time when you're training toward a test, that's okay, but that's not the way we learn. We learn through experience. We mostly learn through experiences, like languages. If you've ever had a child, or you've had a friend having a child, if you're out there and you don't have a child, the reality is that child learns by absorbing a language, not by learning the alphabet and doing all those things. Usually they learn first by objects. Mm-hmm. And then once they learn the objects, then they learn everything else. So there's courses out there that teach languages where all you do is learn how to speak the objects of the language. And then the language comes like that, because that's the way the brain works. But we work best in pictures, when we see things, and then by doing it. So we see the picture, we take the action, we tell ourselves, hey, this feels good or whatever. So we have all these mechanisms in place. And, there are some schools in the world that don't teach reading until they're 14 years old, because they have proven that reading, which is really good. My daughter, I taught her really early because I thought it was something great. And she's a superior reader. She reads like a Stephen King novel in 4 hours. She's a super fast reader. She actually worked at Barnes & Noble because she could, every day before she left, she could read a book before she left. So she
did she comprehend it all?
Oh yeah. She'll go there and she'll read 3 books and buy one. I go, why'd you buy that one? She goes, well, I want to read it over and over again. So, but what they know happens when we read, we shut down the brain circuit that's photographic. Our memories are photographic in nature, which means that they're all there, they're all packaged perfectly, but our recall gets messed up. And when we read, there's something about the act of reading, because it's more of a left brain dominant. And when I say left and right brain, that's not really true anymore. They know that both the right and left hemisphere can do the same things, but it seems like we take one side of our brain. So if we're right-handed, it'd be our left brain, and if it's left-handed, it'd be our right brain. And we use that more than the other. If we could have more like doing martial arts or dancing or doing yoga, Tai Chi, those kind of things re-engage the whole brain. And when our whole brain's active, that's why even dancing before we did this opens up the brain circuits and gets people doing it. And they do this, some of the more creative seminars I've been to, in between things, they'll have people get up and dance or do something, because our body, our brain literally is as big as it is because we move and breathe. If we don't move and breathe, they show that our brain will shrink because of lack of oxygen. The brain gets the oxygen first. So that's a key to what we do.
Wow. Right. You know, what time is it? We could just all pack up now. I've learned so much from you in less than 25 minutes about the brain. I've learned more from you in less time than ever. This is really important. This is important stuff that we learn, that we understand our brain and how it works best for us. Because now I get it. When people are stressed, they don't breathe correctly. So part of the brain requires that oxygen. And lately, with the mask over our faces, a lot of people are stressed because they're not getting the oxygen that they need. And now people are getting angry if you don't wear a mask, or, so those.
Well, Cynthia, my wife had to go into the hospital for a checkup for something. It turned out to be nothing, which was great. But she said she wasn't going to wear a mask. They said, why not? She goes, well, it's unhealthy to breathe in your own CO2. And the doctor goes, I know, you don't have to wear a mask. But most of them are you're running around, even the N95 mask or whatever doesn't stop this. You have to have a hazmat suit on to really block the virus.
Correct.
So I think the fear, we call it psychoimmunology. So when you talk about the brain, we know that the pictures, and the example I give to people when I'm being interviewed on the radio or TV is, they sell so much more allergy medicine now. Because if you go to the Weather Channel online or on your phone, the first thing they're going to show you is a big spore. And they're going to tell you what the spore count is in the trees and the mold. And so that triggers, that psychoimmunology, that triggers your body to produce white marker cells. We have a circulating nervous system. So our nervous system is an extension of our brain, which is 70% of our nervous system's in our brain. But then that triggers our white marker cells, which is our circulating immune system, and instructs it. That's the intelligence, the innate intelligence of our body that's going to work for us. They know if you're stressed out, your immune system isn't going to work as well. Right. They know your brain isn't going to recover well. Correct. Your brain uses a lot of energy. We're designed to literally take a nap every day. It wasn't just for when you were in grade school and they let you lay down on your pillow. We should all be taking naps. The problem is, to take a really good nap, it takes 3 to 4 hours. Because that's how long it takes for a cycle. So what we're doing with BrainTap, using light as the stimulus and the sound as a stimulus and the music, all of that put together in the frequencies we put in there, we trick the brain, because when you get into the states of alpha and theta, which is where we're going in the BrainTap, there's no time. I always liken it to when Einstein said, hey, if you're around a beautiful woman for an hour, it seems like a minute. If you're sitting on a hot stove for a minute, it seems like an hour. So it's all about what you're doing.
Yeah.
So as you think about those things, your brain has to adjust and make changes. So time, now they know there's another dimension. They're saying that the fifth dimension might be the dimension of time. We're learning that in quantum physics, that time isn't what we think it is. Because they can actually send an atomic clock up into space and keep one on Earth, which are never off in 1,000 years, but they'll come back and the one will be off by a fraction of a second, which is impossible. How did it do that? That's because when we move through time, that's why if we're doing something right now in the brain, there's something in psychology they call infinite now. That's what's happening to people. And that seems like it would be a good thing, but that's what happens to people in prison, or the Stockholm syndrome. They don't have an end to their, like right now, nobody's telling us when the end date is. We're in phase 2 or we're in phase 3 or whatever it is. And people are saying, what's the new reality? Well, the new reality is, let's all educate ourselves and stay healthy. That's the new reality.
That's the goal.
But if we don't have an outcome, like if people aren't outcome driven, like instead of having short-term gratification, a lot of people are fighting with their short-term demons because our brain says, I want it now. But logic dictates we have to give up some things now, but we don't want to give away our quote freedoms for in exchange for whatever's going to happen down the road. So we have to kind of weigh those things, and that happens every day. So when if somebody wants to lose weight, they're going to have to give up the immediate gratification of dessert after every meal in lieu of being healthy. So we always say nothing tastes as good as thin and healthy feels. So they have to make that, our brain has to make that switch. Now these switches happen all the time anyway. If the listeners are out there who are old enough, if they remember the Rolaids commercial, where they say, how do you spell relief? ROLAIDS. Well, 7th graders in New York were tested on that. This was about 20 years ago. And when they were tested, 70% of them got it wrong. They couldn't spell relief. They spelled it ROLAIDS.
Oh
and
my gosh.
20% of them actually challenged the teacher. So it was all part of a study because they had been conditioned over and over again, spaced repetition, watching television, doing those things. The television,
television is programming us.
Yes. Yeah. You really have to be careful of if you don't program yourself, like to stay healthy and whole and, whatever your values are and your religious beliefs are, then there's always someone else who's willing to take on, to give you their beliefs, to give them their mission. There's a saying that if you don't stand for anything, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything.
Yes.
And part of that is just having your own guidance, knowing that, and our brain is really good at that, but it has to, if the brain isn't not functioning correctly, like with dementia, what's happening is those 6 or 9 packets of information are arriving at their destination point at different times. It'd be like going to watch a cinema at the cinema and the sound comes in differently than the screen. And then you try to correct it, but you don't have the tools to do it. And pretty soon your brain just goes, you know what? I don't want to do that anymore. It's not worth it. And then the brain just shuts down the circuit altogether and says, okay, that circuit's ran its life. So we have to re-engage it. That's where the light in the ears come in. And why we use light, sound, and vibration is because we want to, once there's blood flow, circulation, and light causes vasodilation and blood flow, and then we can carry the nutrients into the brain. We can also get the good sleep that we need. Sleep is our secret weapon. If I could say one thing that BrainTap does over everything else, it's probably to help people sleep deeper. And we're very fortunate to have many different studies that have shown the depth of sleep, but now we're going to get some double-blind studies from Brazil and India. They've got a couple going right now, so that'll be kind of
amazing.
Fascinating.
And in India, you had mentioned that they are educating children with BrainTap, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so real quick, because we've been talking about BrainTap for those of you who are tuning in, because many people tune in, tune out, but BrainTap is a way to rewrite the program in your head. We've talked about our thoughts and how our thoughts convert into our feelings and our feelings convert into our actions. This is, some people say nip it in the bud. I say nip it in the thought.
Right.
Nip it in the thought. That's where everything starts. Murder starts with a thought, and going to the moon, or today's launch that was scrubbed in Florida, right around my backyard. That launch started with a thought. That rocket, just the invention, started with a thought. So we need to make sure that our thoughts are in the direction that we want. We're focusing on what we want. So BrainTap is an app, not just an app, but you can get an app. You can get the app at whenyouneedafriend.com in the Shop Now bag. And you can get a free 15-day trial, or I think it's 99 cents for 45 days. And you don't need the headset. You can use your earbuds, but the headset, that is just absolutely awesome. I love the headset. But you get this app and it has different, let me see, I'm creating different, I guess, what do you call each one? Bundles.
There's different bundles, yeah.
Different bundles. And each bundle has lots of different meditations in them. So they created the meditation bundle for the BrainTap retreat was specifically for people who are under a lot of stress with the coronavirus, or if you just want to. So it's free. If it's 15 day for free. You don't even have to give any information. I think just your name or your email or whatever, but that's it. But I just want you guys to try it without the headset so you can see how wonderful it is. And then there's an incredible benefit with the headset. So the headset, Patrick, has different mechanism. But before we go into the mechanism of it, I want to understand beta, alpha, theta, delta. A little while ago, you spoke about gamma. You said gamma. People that have a lot of gamma are highly intellectual. Is that what you were saying?
Well, could be, but they're mostly, we see it in creative people, healers. Like when somebody's doing, if they do Reiki, we've done some scans on some people that are Reiki masters and they're bringing this energy in. And when they're in that flow state, their gamma just goes off the chart. So there's, what happens. So let's start with beta. Beta,
Okay.
we call your reactionary mind. So that's the mind we need it. It's kind of an evil that we need because we need to be able to be logical. We need to be able to think. But remember, our conscious mind only runs 5% of the show. So that part, though, if we let that part control us, that's where the fear, the frustration, the anxiety comes in, because that's the only brainwave state in a normal brain that they're happening. Now, if you're feeling those in the other brainwave states, you're probably going to be diagnosed with some kind of disorder.
Okay.
Because it's not natural to have them. Like, let's say it's like bleeding through radio stations, when you talk about it. So when you go to alpha, alpha is a creative space. There's actually a brainwave in between there
So
called
that's the intuitive mind.
yes, the intuitive mind that we call it. And so what Deepak Chopra says, 95% of what's going to happen to us tomorrow to 98% we know about today. So what you have to ask yourself is, what are you pretending not to know? Because most of the time you know what you need to change, you know what you need to do, you know how you're going to take action, but you don't do it. You kind of go against your own best evidence. And that's where the intuition comes in. And if we can, in fact, HeartMath did a research project, which is phenomenal. They actually showed, because they were measuring what was happening in the heart at the time before they showed them pictures. One picture was a good experience, one picture was a negative experience. The person knew it up to 5 seconds before they flipped the card what it was going to be.
Wow.
Now, how did they know that? Because there's a field. We have this field of energy that we live in. They know the heart field is about 18 feet around us, but that's just one field of energy. So we're all connected. There's not one, we're all connected in some way. So this biocomputer we have, a 100 billion neural bit processor, when it's in that, think of alpha, theta, delta, and all these different brainwaves like different Wi-Fi networks. They instruct the body to do different things. So, of course, when we're in beta, our body's trying to produce the dopamine, which is the biggest addiction right now, because dopamine makes us feel good, and that's why people get addicted to their phones or to computer games. When we're experiencing alpha, or let's say going to the ocean, or going to a book club, or hanging out with our families if it's a good time, and doing all those things, and when you're in alpha, your brain creates a neurochemical called acetylcholine. Now, this is also present, one of the heavily used neurotransmitters when we're in love. So that's why when people are doing things they love, and basically what science has shown us is it takes about $30,000 to $40,000 worth of that neurochemical just to do something like play a round of golf, if you like playing golf.
Wow.
Something like that. So they also know that when we're helping other people, when we're of service to people, we get these neurological dumps of energy. And even though some people aren't doing it for that, that's just part of it. And now they know some people get addicted really to helping people, which I think is the best addiction, instead of being selfish and, because whatever's going to make you feel good, that's what people mostly do. And then when we get to theta is your inventive mind. So usually at night, you're going to go through theta maybe 8 to 10 times, but we're consciously aware of theta when we go to sleep and when we wake up. So the listeners out there might remember a time when they were waking up in the morning, they heard a song, maybe they didn't really like that song, but it stayed in their head all day. That's because in the state of theta, especially, alpha's a little bit too, it's called hypermnesia, supermemory. Your brain, that's when you said, how do children learn? They're primarily in theta. They learn everything. Their brain is like a sponge, and up to 6, 7 years old. Then they start what they call pruning. Your brain actually disconnects as we get older. It doesn't connect. Like people go, I'm smarter, my brain's more connected. That's not the way it works. When a baby's born, it's basically neurologically connected. Then it has to starts pruning so that it can make reality out of this. It can, that's why people get different things happening.
Do you think that that's something that we condition the children? Like if we were to just let a child be who they are without telling them no, yes, this is a pen, this is a headset, and they figure it out on their own, do you think that we would be able to stay connected like animals, or how instinctive they are? And
I think that's true. I think showing them and telling them is fine. I think it's when we start doing things like when we write, remember this cup is a representation. My brain is making this cup. I don't know if this is really what it looks like or not, because we don't even see the real world. We're getting electrical impulses in our brain and radiation through whatever's going on. So, but our brain makes that image. So when we do that, that's happening all the time. We live in a sea of energy. So I think as children, and I've had this, I actually was doing a demonstration at Hampton University, which is near Virginia Beach. Mm-hmm. And they had me do a demonstration where I could tell somebody that I was breaking open the smelling salts like for a boxer. And I told them it was their favorite perfume. And I cracked it open, they smelled it. They thought it was their favorite perfume. They put it on people. It was so strong, nobody could put it up there. But the brain is so powerful. I had them eat an onion that was so pungent. I told them it was a Macintosh apple. And then when I was bringing them out of that state, I said, okay, you're going to return to the room. Everything's fine. You're going to see everything as it is. He went, he gasped. And I said, what did you see when that happened? He said, well, I forgot that we're so ugly here. And I said, and this is a guy he wasn't metaphysical. He was a college senior. And he said, everything was just energy. And then as soon as you said that, everything snapped into place. And I started seeing people in separation of things.
Wow. Wow.
So he was in an altered state, like it reminded me of what some people say when they do like ayahuasca or something. I've never done that, so I don't know. Mm-hmm. But you hear about these adventures people have with these hallucinogens, and that's what he basically triggered it for himself. So when we talk about theta, just to kind of finish that thought, theta it creates GABA. If you look into the news right now, the drug companies, that's the main thing they're looking for right now. How can they develop more GABA drugs, producing GABA? And of course, they don't want to use the real thing. They want to synthesize it so they can capitalize on it. But the reality is that we create as much GABA as we need, and our own GABA is much better. But they know that's what's going to help people sleep better. Mm-hmm. So if you experience GABA during the day, you actually sleep better at night. It's not like you need it all at night. That's why the morning sessions you do actually are going to help you to sleep better at night, because you're setting up your brain. You're waking up the brain. And those morning sessions are actually a little bit of alpha and a little bit of beta. There's a brainwave called SMR, sensory motor rhythm, that has to do with cognition and the vestibular system. And unfortunately, as we get better looking and more intelligent with age, certain things happen to our brain, and that happens to be one of the brainwaves that gets atrophied. And so that's why when people start doing these games like computer games or jigsaw puzzles and different things like that, that's why they find that their thinking comes back, because they're triggering that circuit. But even better, our brain learns best passively. To give you an example of that.
Yeah.
They did a classroom experiment where all of us, or at least I did, I went to a Catholic school. So we had to learn some crazy things that nobody should ever have to learn, like the periodic chart of elements, right? But
well, that's not just reserved for Catholics.
Right.
I do too.
But in this example, what happened, this was in a grade school. They showed them for one semester. They never talked about it, but in the side of the room, there was a projector that just changed every 3 to 5 seconds to another periodic table. They never spoke about it. It was just there, because what happens when we're in a learning environment, our brain gets full. We then get distracted. We look around the room. We're going to focus on something. When they were distracted, the first thing they did is they'd notice, oh, this thing's going over here. Oh, that's what that means. That's what that means. They tested them before they even started studying them. Most of them had a 70 to 80% right before they ever started learning it, because it was present. That's a passive learning. So in just like in the old days, most of the things we learned, we would go learn with a mentor. We'd have a internship, we'd be there for 3 years or 5 years, like when I go to watch the glass blowers in Ireland, I'm going, wow, those people are dedicated, but they were interning, they were apprentice for 5 years before they ever got to blow the glass. They were just making the sand and doing the things. So most of us, unfortunately, aren't willing to do that. We want it now. So that's where things like brain tap, when we call it at Quantum University, we call it the quantum super learning advantage, because if we can get you to learn in a relaxed state, you're going to retain that much better. And in fact, they've done so many studies since the 70s, they call it the Mozart effect. If we can get you into alpha, we know that theta is even better, but without light, it's kind of hard to get people to theta. So what we found though is if people do the headset and then they do the sound, they can still get there because their brain remembers it. So
Wow.
then we have delta. Delta is the sleep state.
A deep, deep, deep
Yes,
delta sleep. Yeah.
yes. So we call that unconsciousness. There's no real learning that happens there, but your body recharges, rejuvenates. They know you can still hear there though. Just like during surgeries, they've taken people out of surgery and they said, there's no way you heard that. You were out, what the doctor said, but your brain is still recording all that information. And then when we talked about gamma, of course, is we're still looking at some ways. We're doing our lab that's being set up in Orlando right now with Dr. Sidral. We're going to be doing some more experiments with gamma because we were very fortunate. We went and met Lou Tai at MIT, and we were showing her how the brain tap actually gets 23% on average across the board improvement in gamma activity, where they have a $10 million machine that only gets 6.
Wow.
So, and she goes, well, we already have $10 million in investment. Well, I'm sorry, but you just need to, when you have that 10 hertz frequency, that alpha and that 7.8 hertz frequency theta, that creates that improvement. Think of it like a tuning fork. We hit a tuning fork and it resonates and that frequency improves. It's kind of like the old saying, high tide rises all boats. We're going to improve all brainwave activity. In stress, when you think about stress, or if you talk to yourself negatively, especially in school, if you're talking about learning, then you shut down these brain circuits because the more stressed you are, the more you get into beta, the less likely you are to create a solution. That's why we call it the reactionary mind. It already has to be a part of your DNA, let's say what you've done, your behavior pattern, in order to make that change. So we want to open up to an infinite field of possibility because your brain is capable of doing that. It's capable of thinking outside of your box. The problem is everybody creates their own box and then they get in it and then they complain about it. We need to step outside of the box and, start living. And that some of that has to do with your comfort zone. How comfortable are you?
This is fascinating, and I want to talk about kind of the symptoms if you have too much theta or not enough alpha or too much beta. I mean, if you're like reactionary all the time, what do you need more theta? So before
Right.
we go there, and that's what Brain Tap does. It actually reads your brain and knows if what it is that it needs to tap into the brain so that it'll trigger a response. Like you said at the beginning, when you're meditating, it triggers a response. And so that's what Brain Tap is all about. But before we go into that, because I really want to talk about the headset and what it does and how it does speak to the brain and rewrites the program, I want to ask all of you who are watching now, later on, go to whenyouneedafriend.com, subscribe. And while you're there, of course, like and follow me on social media, subscribe on YouTube, and BitChute is so important. BitChute is not censoring us. So if we need to move to BitChute completely, at least you know where to find us. And if you are subscribed to whenyouneedafriend.com, then you also know where to find us, because if you are subscribed, you already have Dr. Porter's information in your emails. So you know how to get a hold of him, you know how to get a hold of me. So important. While you're there, make sure that you check out my sponsors. Without my sponsors, there would be no class. Or it would be difficult to do a class. And so sponsors like, Nori, it's nutritional, Oncology Research Institute. And of course, there's so much that we're going to be bringing with Nori. And Keep Me Safe Organics, tomorrow we have a class and we're giving everybody away some free samples that wants to come out, who wants to try some of the Keep Me Safe Organics non-toxic beauty products. First alternative care, telemedicine. Yesterday, the president talked about how telemedicine is the most important invention that has come to us lately. And we have first alternative care for the entire family, not just telemedicine for family practice or non-urgent care visits, but also dermatology and 3 hours a year of behavioral health counseling for the entire household. The pharmacy in Merritt Island that's doing incredible things as a family in Merritt. It's a wonderful place where you can take a pill and turn it into a compound. We have Live Longer Medical, making you as beautiful on the inside as the outside. And of course, our affiliate programs that I've talked to you about. And Patrick knows all about grounding. You are 100% supporter of grounding while doing this as well. And of course, brain tap. So go to my shop now bag and get your free brain tap sample. So you can just go in there and click on it, and it will give you a free 15-day trial. And that 15-day trial, you get all these bundles and you can just have fun, and you can do it as many times as you want. So please support my sponsors the way they're supporting the classroom. And if you are, if you'd like to become an enrolled student in the classroom and help us grow by giving us your time, your talent, your treasure, whatever you can, whether it's $1 or $1,000 a month, we are open to help grow the classroom to be able to do more so that I can bring this to you as well. So today we have Dr. Patrick Porter, who the first time I met him, I was not able, we were making plans to get him in the classroom, but when I saw him for the second time, because we lost each other's information, I ran to him. And we decided that I'm not just going to be using this. I want to bring this to my doctors, bring this to my audience and the students in the classroom, because it is very important. How many times do we speak to ourselves worse than we speak to a child? So it's time to rewrite the program. Now, Patrick, there is so much. There's isochronic tones. What does that do to the brain? How does it balance everything out?
Well, isochronic tones is our body is used to those frequencies because the Earth itself resonates at, depending upon where you're at on the planet, it could be 7.8 to 12 hertz frequency. Mm-hmm. So your body is used to adjusting. We have a very adaptive nervous system. So we're going to use those frequencies to do that. Yeah. And as you get into that, the isochronic tones also protect against it. Let's say one of your ears isn't as good as the other. Like in my case, I lost 40% of the hearing in one of my ears when I blew out my eardrum in a flight. And that's when I noticed, when we were doing tracking at the clinic, that one of my brain wasn't keeping up. And that's going to alter my brain. So I said, how am I going to fix that? So we started implementing a layer. Think of it like an orchestra. You could play it with just the violin, but if you had the viola, it adds a richer sound. So this is kind of another background sound, and we do use that in conjunction with the binaurals.
Let me see if you can hear it. Can you hear it?
You can hear a little bit of it, yes.
Realization that through the use and power of your mind, you can relax, let go.
I'm ready to brain tap right now. So the lights, you said that the lights cause you to go deeper and faster into a meditative state?
Yes. Most people, they don't think it will do that, but your eyes are closed. So think about if you've ever been in the back of a car and you're driving through a country road and the trees are flat and some people just fall asleep. That's the same thing. It's the same kind of thing that's happening, except we're actually very specific frequencies that we're using to guide the brain.
Well, we only have a couple of minutes for the podcast left, but we do have some time after the classroom. I don't know how much time you have after that. I do want to talk about the different features of the headset, because even though people can do this without this, you're so brilliant about this, because there is an app. So you have this app and you can use it with your own headsets, whatever it is that you want. But the improvement, is it 30% better to use the headset?
Yeah, what we find is it takes, to get the same neurological change, it takes about three times using the audio to one time using the audio and visual stimulation. So there's a pretty good difference. Plus with the light, you're getting the vasodilation. You're still getting a lot of the health improvements with the sound, because most people aren't using their auditory channel. It's only about 10% of what most people do. So when you add the sound, like we do, it gives them a rich experience because they're not usually playing in that air. They're not usually playing in that sandbox.
Amazing. So before we go say goodbye, for the people listening on the podcast, just know that this class is live and you can join us at any time at whenyouneedafriend.com. You just have to click on the YouTube or click onto Facebook, whichever way you want to listen to us today. And you can always ask a question. So make sure you type in a Q and ask your question. What we're going to do is, after we say goodbye to the podcast, we'll have a talk with the teacher's pets. And if you have any questions, go ahead and ask your questions at that time. Now, Patrick, are there any last minute words of wisdom as people want to start kind of like reprogram the brain to focus on what we do want? What would you say to them?
Well, I would encourage you to focus on possibilities instead of the limitations.
Mm-hmm.
One thing we've known on the history of mankind is that if there's a technology problem, there's always a technology solution. There's solutions out there to offset. Grounding will help with the 5G situation. You got brain will help you do it. So there's benefits there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So go to whenyouneedafriend.com, the shopping bag, scroll down shopping bag and click on it. You'll find the Brain Tap headset. Click on that and start tapping. We're going to continue our conversation when we leave right now. Please remember, we'll be right here waiting for you worldwide at whenyouneedafriend.com. This is Lillian McDermott and Dr. Patrick Porter wishing you love, peace, joy, and unexpected abundance. Make it the best day ever. Good job. Good job. So we have some questions, okay?
The opinions and advice expressed on the Lillian McDermott radio show are intended for the individual callers and guests on the program and are presented to our wider audience solely for general educational purposes. Please act responsibly and consult personally with your own medical, psychological, or nutritional expert before taking any steps to improve your life.
Okay, so we do have a question from Camilla. So Camilla, I don't understand if you're saying that you work with people with ADD or anxiety, or are you asking, does this work? And boy, are you in for a treat. Does this work with people with ADD and anxiety? So Patrick, take it away.
Okay. Well, first of all, it's designed for ADD because that's what I had. And I talk about it in my first book, Awaken the Genius. And that's why they use it in the school systems, because in fact, the schools, we're in 4 different schools now in 7 universities, and they call it brain prep. It prepares the brain to learn. And what that means is, because when you go in there, you might be a little scared, might be a little frightening, the stress is there. As far as anxiety and that, we have 2 different research studies going on right now because our pilot studies showed so much. They know that when the 2 hemispheres are out of sync, that can cause these feelings of anxiety and stress we talked about. And I don't know if you've ever met Dr. Kelly Miller down in Florida.
You know, I did meet him and I do want to get a hold of him. I want to meet with him. I want to see what he's doing.
Yeah, he's got a great book called Saving Your Brain. Mm-hmm. And we did an experiment, or he did. We just helped consult him on it. And he took women who were 55 to 65. They were all diagnosed with dementia. They all took the test that said, yes, you have dementia. The only thing they did, and they all had anxiety and fear, because that's what happens. You know, you're basically, there's no future. They don't know where they're at. They can remember the past, but they can't remember what's going on right now or in the future. At the end of 6 weeks, not only did they weren't on the dementia scale anymore, they could function with a functional memory. They were all taking off that schedule, but they had 64% more neuroplasticity. So think of anxiety or any disorder that's in the nervous system is flow. And that's where breathing comes in. That's why most of our doctors, if you're using brain tap, that's great, but you also still need to do the physical thing. We recommend going to learn dance or going to learn yoga, going to learn Tai Chi. Do something that's going to get the body moving. Our bodies are designed to move and breathe. And anxiety is the energy that's not moving. Every negative emotional state can be summed up with one thing: lack of breath. Think of every negative emotion and there's one thing in common: the people aren't breathing. So breathing exercises just in general will help anxiety. Also, there's a technique if you're experiencing anxiety right now. We do this in some of the sessions on Brain Tap. We have you roll your eyes in big circles to the right like 6 times and to the left 6 times. And what you'll find is if you do that every morning, pretty soon your brain forgets how to process anxiety.
Wow.
It's a learned response. And your eyes are not only the windows to the soul, they're the keyboard to the brain, just like the spine is. The spine is the keyboard of the brain. So that's why when you're moving, you're rewiring the brain. When you move your eyes, you're rewiring the brain. And some people will actually, that's why doodling with both hands at the same time sometimes is help people with Tourette's and anxiety and stress. It's just re-engaging the nervous system. We have these primitive reflexes too that there are doctors out there that can reset these primitive reflexes. A lot of times anxiety comes because they weren't unlocked. When we're growing up, these should all be not active. Like some people have a response that might be in your passenger seat of your car and you're stopping fine, but as soon as they see brake lights, they go,
That's my
they just,
mom.
they
That's my
jump.
mom.
That's a reflex problem that can be fixed. There are plenty of neurological doctors out
Yeah.
there that can help that.
Yeah, I used to put a bag over my mom's head. That's how I fixed that problem. Well, my mom does have dementia, and she's, every 2 minutes it's the same conversation. And so someone that advanced, and I remember when she stayed with me just recently, this was like right at the beginning of coronavirus. I had her with me like every day, 24/7. And I loved every minute of it. And so I was having her do brain tap before and after. Like when I stayed with my father had surgery, when I stayed with them, and before I took my mom, when I stayed with them, I had them both do it before my dad's surgery. He was very calm. The next day, my dad has anxiety. I didn't know this trick about so when we separated my mom and dad, what happened was my mom, it didn't have the same effect for her unless I laid next to her and held her hand. I don't know what but I was with her all day long. I still was doing the class. I still was doing work. And it was like, there was one time I came back because I put the brain tap on her. That was our routine. In the morning, I did the brain tap, and at night I did the brain tap with her. And I would sit right and work while she was doing it. And, but one time I came back because I couldn't hold her hand, and she had the brain tap like this, like this. And so she had moved it because I wasn't with her. And I thought, I don't know at this point if I'm harming her or if I'm doing how does this help someone with dementia or cognitive decline balance the brain?
Yeah. Well, the main reason it does it is we're putting different stimulus. We actually have specific sessions to re-engage the left hemisphere because usually what happens is it slows down over the right hemisphere. But what's happening is we're just going to fire off when the right eye gets information. It's stimulating the left brain, and vice versa with the ears. So we're doing this cross-lateral training. And basically, there's a saying in neurology that says those neurons that fire together wire together.
Yes.
So we're getting the brain to wire based on stimulus. It's a stimulus response. So with the brain, if those brain circuits haven't been used because they're not getting let's say they're not getting the blood supply there, or the toxic load on the brain is too much. And we haven't really talked about it. We talked about it the first time, but you only detox the brain when you're sleeping. So if you're not getting deep sleep, that can cause anxiety and stress and all these other disorders, foggy brain.
Yeah.
But the main reason it does it is we're exercising the brain. And our brain is like every other muscle of the body. We can build muscle at any age. We can improve our brain at any age. Of course, if it's organically, there's been too much damage, then there's only so much you can do. But we do know that the brain, just like the liver, your liver can rebuild itself. That's why they do liver surgeries now, where you can just put a quarter of a liver in there and then it grows into a whole liver. So they know our brain can do that too. It just needs the supply lines. It needs the nutrients. So a lot of people they're taking these great nutrients, but they're still under stress. And what happens is, might be what was happening to your mother. If she was under stress, then she's not able to release enough to get into the sympathetic, get out of sympathetic overload and into parasympathetic. We call it get out of the fight or flight brain and get into the healing brain. And so, but when you're in the healing brain, we've done a lot of different studies with that, but we know that your body will absorb the nutrients better. And then when it's time for the brain to open up to receive those nutrients, which usually only happens at night. So that's why you should take any brain supplements really before you go to bed.
Yes.
Or that's why they take the minerals too. You take minerals.
What are some good brain supplements that you suggest? Or, everybody has to make their own decision, but are there anything that you say is really good?
Well, I think just the minerals are so important. Most people don't get the minerals they need. Like we use, there's one called Get Off Your Acid. It's Dr. Daryl Joffrey, his product. and he's kind of the nutrient to the stars. He's the nutritional expert,
Yeah.
and he's somebody that you should really talk to about this.
I would love to meet him. Yeah.
He just did a sugar summit too, so
Oh, great.
so he knows about that. But what
Look
we
me
find,
up.
yeah, so there's a lot of great. Usually there's a preparatory blends like OptiBrain with Optimum Nutrition, which is with Dr. Brimhall's group out in Arizona. There's a good. We had our own supplement for a while, but the science changes so often. We decided
Yeah.
to just most of our doctors, our neurological doctors, have really good. Really, our brain needs the same nutrients as the rest of the body. We need to make sure that it's being fed those things. We need to most of the time it's inflammation in the brain too that's causing the problem. So any foods you can eat or anything you can do to lower inflammation. I'm not a dietary expert, in that way. Usually I rely on other people I interview to do that. But there are some really good ones we could introduce you to.
Absolutely.
Down in Florida, we have Dr. Bagnell. He would be awesome.
Okay.
And Dr. Miller they both have supplement lines that they recommend.
Well, okay. So for those of you, we didn't even dive into this app. There is a power user as well as bundles. And so if you are a clinician and you're listening today because you're fascinated with the brain or want to help your patients get to that next level of healing, there's such a thing as a power user. And from A to Z, from abuse, addiction, phobias, airline phobias, alcohol. If you have a hard time with the morning or you want to do something that'll stimulate your brain in the morning, autism, for brain enrichment, they even have bundles for that. Cancer, whether it's coping with it or saying no to cancer, childbirth, children. My little baby, Jacob, he doesn't sit still for long, but he did brain tap. His parents, my daughter and my son-in-law, they were amazed. They did not even think that he would do this, but he did the whole 8 minutes. And it was like, we're all going, oh. And
we just
afterwards,
we have some new ones that aren't even in there yet for children. We're doing children's affirmations done by children. My 2 grandchildren, I'm teaching them how to record affirmations.
oh, and
Then we're going to make them available to the other kids to listen to.
Oh, that is wonderful. So all the way for, if you want Christian affirmations, dentistry, diabetes, gluten-free lifestyle, grief, health. I mean, all the way I can go down. I mean, I don't many, there's over 1,000, 1,500 different forms of meditations.
Yeah, we have other speakers too, besides myself. We have some of my sessions are done. We're getting more, like Meryl Hemingway's coming on board to do
Is
some
she?
recording. And we have some others like Kathy Smith and some other, they're reading my script so that if people want to hear a woman's voice doing it, that's great. And
Yeah.
we have them record them.
Well, I like Patrick Porter. I love listening. This is Dr. Patrick Porter. It's always nice to hear you. And I have this kind of like private joke with Dr. Porter. I say, every time I go near him, I feel like clucking like a chicken, but he doesn't do that at all. He has never made me cluck like a chicken. He is a really good man. So for those of you who have questions still, oops. Oh, here. I've got you on there. Okay. Let me turn you off here. I don't think I've ever turned you off. Here we go.
Yeah.
Let me see. Hold on. Where am I? How do I?
You can just swipe the whole thing up, I think.
Yeah, I need to swipe the whole thing up. Okay. So here we go. So for those of you who are interested or curious, you can, at no risk, just go to whenyouneedafriend.com, click onto the little shop bag, the shop now or whatever, shop with Lily, click on it and get yourself your own get started on it. Look at the different bundles. There are thousands, hundreds of them that you can choose from. There's different topics. Like if you're looking at the bundles, it's like there's a training for brain tap. There's of course the brain tap retreat for the people who are having extra stress for coronavirus. There's the sleep that I love. I love the Sleep RX. It's amazing. And then I love the morning one. I love doing the morning. And then of course, I love them all. And waking up, instead of coffee, you can do your meditation, your wake up. It's just phenomenal. And but there's even more. So real quick, so if you have any questions specifically to this, please ask your questions. Because this turns off, you can't use this for other things. It's actually picking up all the vibrations and information. So you can't just use it for a headset to listen to iTunes or whatever. This is specifically for this app, but you can use different earphones to do the app. So when I turn this on, when I turn on the headset, the far infrared lights, how does that help with the deeper meditation?
Well, what those lights look solid when you're showing them, but they're not. They're actually flashing at 197 hertz frequency.
Really?
So 197 times over that every second. So it's flashing really fast. The body then interprets that. Our brain loves patterns. So that pattern, actually, Dr. Nogier, who's the iridology, he proved that you could do this with frequencies. And then people started doing it with lasers. And so lasers are expensive and you have to have somebody manning the laser station. So what we did is I thought, wow, how can we get the same millijoules? Because what we're doing is we're putting light into the ear. The hemoglobin are absorbing that light. And that light then, and from the hemoglobin is flowing through the bloodstream. It's going to find a cell in the body that's dying. They call that apoptosis. And then it exchanges that photon in the mitochondria and kickstarts the engine of the cell. So then the instruction set is reestablished, the cell comes back to life. So they've proven it at Harvard that they had a experiment where they took a chicken heart and they kept it alive for 35 years. They said they could have kept it alive forever because as long as you give it nutrients and you get the toxins out, our cells aren't designed to die. But you know, somebody forgot to feed it or something. I don't know how it died at 35 years, but it was a long time.
Someone got in a lot of trouble, I'm sure.
Yeah. So when you think about it, our body, the most underprescribed nutrient, when you said, what do we need for the brain? The biggest thing our brain need is light. And even in ancient scriptures, when I go to India, I learned this, and I didn't even know it. We brought over our light helmet. We have a helmet that goes on the head for photobiomodulation. And they did some experiments with it. They're doing great. And then one of the professors, Dr. Vivek, who's one of our science advisory board members now, he said, I need to show you this scripture. It talked about helotherapy, which is sun therapy. And what he showed is that in the Indian culture, they do their morning yoga outside because they know that there's infrared from the sun. They even talk about it. And that infrared actually fills the receptors of the skin and they don't burn.
Wow.
So if your receptors are filled with infrared light, so they get up in the morning 2 hours before sunrise, and then they watch the sunrise, the meditation. You know, when I used to do yoga with Yogi Bhajan in Phoenix, they would always end with the temple doors were always open to the sunrise. So you'd be done and you'd be doing, you know, your little meditation afterwards. They call yoga nidra. And then you'd get up and you'd watch the sunrise. That was just part of their ritual every day. And that they now know that actually even resets the gut biome.
Wow.
So what we did is I said, what are the frequencies that are doing that? 470 nanometer light and 633 nanometer light. So I put those in the ears. And the nice thing was we did this for autism because an autistic child or an adult, they can't take instruction the same way you and I can. So we need to talk to the subconscious. We need to talk to the body, in other words. Your body is your subconscious. Think of it like your hard drive. They also call it psychosomatic. You know, when things happen to the body, we can trigger it back to the mind or to a thought. And so we know that if we can get the body to release that sympathetic overload, which is happening because of the toxic load maybe with these autistic kids, or maybe it's just stress, something happened. It's got to be thoughts, traumas, or toxins. And for some of them, it happened before they could really have a coherent thought. They were just absorbing reality. So it had to be a trauma of some sort, a toxin, something happening. And it was a cascading event. You know, that's why they get away with it. If something were to happen. Well, it wasn't that. It was it was.
Are you talking about vaccines?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's just call it what it is because, you know, we know, I know there's a lot of people that love vaccines and that's fine, but just know what's in it can harm a child later on. We don't know about it at that time, but those toxins do make their way through the body as well.
Yeah, I've dealt with too many children over the years to think it's just a coincidence for all these people to go. And the big thing is, if you're going to do it, Have them spread it out. Don't let them give your child 13 vaccines at one time,
Yeah.
and not while they're still in the hospital just being born. You know,
But they still have the viruses from the animals. So those retroviruses is what they're trying to keep us away from, that distraction that a virus in an animal is fine, no different than a virus within us when we're healthy. And a rat virus is good for the rat. It's no big deal for the rat, but that rat virus sucked into my body or injected into my body through the vaccine, which has the antibodies and everything that they create the batch with, it does have a problem because it's not human. So that's another story.
Yes.
But anyway, it's why I'm so passionate about that, taking a stand for informed choice and vaccine safety. That's what I stand for. If you want to have a vaccine, that's fine with me. I don't have a problem with that. So interesting. And I don't know where I read it or where I learned this, but lately, when I've been, if there's some sensitivity or a burning sensation in the ear, is that about the meridian being clogged? Is that what I read, or is that?
Yeah. If we were to, we have some pretty neat technology, our HRV, which is the heart rate variability, which maybe we could do a show on that at some point and show the slides. But the heart is now the gold standard for health. They can predict, not today. You might have some problem today that's showing up in the heart rate variability, but it's a sign of long-term health or not. So what we know is that as we work with, the body, we can see the result of the heart rate and what's happening. So the key here is to keep that heart rate normalized. And then let's circle back. When I said that, what was the question again?
It was about the meridians and the heat in the ear, that sometimes it hurts and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah. If you've ever cut your ear, it takes a lot to get it to stop. It's really going, because there's so much pressure in the ear. Your blood circulates through your body every 45 seconds, but through the ear, it takes 3 to 4 minutes because it's such small vessels. That's why it's a perfect place to blood dope, if you will. We're gonna blood dope with light, so we can put it there. And then we know that where it's at and that light gets in there, it's being absorbed, it goes from there into the brain. So it's basically, it goes down through the carotid arteries and goes through the rest of the body. Wow. So it's just a great delivery system, but some people will feel warm. So what I typically have them do, they'll call our help desk and they'll say, hey, my ears are getting warm. What's going on? Is there something wrong? I'll say, well, next time take it off and feel the LEDs. You'll feel they're cool. Mm-hmm. It's light energy in the form of photons. And we are photic. We're solar panels, and that's why people get seasonal affective disorder, not in Florida where you're at, but, in places like New York City or, well,
people
Seattle.
are probably experiencing that right now with the shutdown.
Yeah. The worst thing you can do when you have a virus that dies in sunlight, the sun, the sun's a great antiseptic.
I understand. We're not getting the right information. I understand.
Right. And plus our bodies are designed to be around people. Mm-hmm. The worst thing we can do for immunity is not be around people. So it's like, I don't know. Somebody told me yesterday, I was on a show where they said that they're afraid now that the coronavirus is going to be gone before they get enough samples to create the vaccine. I go, why is that a problem? It's a natural flu. Just let it run its course. We would have been done with this in March easily. Yeah. If they'd let it run its course. And I'm sorry for the people who are dying, but they would have been their flu. I mean, here in New Bern, they're counting the death of somebody who was in, we know some nurses here, and they're counting the death of somebody going through chemotherapy treatment at 85 years old who died. They said it was corona.
Well, that's because the doctors in hospitals are incentivized to put the CPT code for coronavirus because they get twice as much. So there's an incentive. People need to wake up to this, Patrick. And I just recently, posted that Costco won't allow you to go in without a mask now, but I was able to go into Costco at the height of this pandemic without a mask. And so I posted on it. I got so many replies and so many angry. There were some great educated people understanding my point, No one asked me why I don't want to wear a mask. Everybody assumed I was vain, or people that assumed the worst in me thought it was vanity. But the reality is, I understand that as an asthmatic or as a human being that breathes the air, that I need my oxygen. And if it worked, I would do it.
Right.
But it doesn't work. So I'm not going to just do something just because I'm being told to do it. I need to do something that is proven to me that works. And so many examples, but that's neither here or there. That is what you were talking about earlier, how the mind imprints these things, and what's happening with the media, even though, like, for example, yesterday, and I'm not for or against Trump, I'm just reporting the news. Trump said that, this is the biggest deal in a long time. They have lowered all the costs of insulin, and he's worked really hard with all these different players to bring it down. And then he asked, should I get insulin? He asked that question. In the news today was Trump asking if he should get insulin. Maybe he should get insulin, not that he lowered the prices for seniors. That was one of the reasons, and they're tying this to Corona, is people with diabetes can't afford their insulin. And so many of the people who passed had diabetes. And so he used this opportunity to say, lower the cost or we're going to take it somewhere else. And he did. He took it somewhere else. And now it's max $35 for a senior to get that. But anyway,
Right.
We're being programmed again. But unfortunately, it's to fear our viruses and bacteria that are naturally in our body.
I always encourage people, you can go online, look up what is propaganda, and they'll have a checklist. And if they don't have, most of the time on the news, unfortunately, it's all fear-based. That's shutting down our immune system. I choose to watch only enough to know what's going on so I can be educated. But as soon as I start to feel a little angst about it, I'm turning it off, because I know there's nothing good can come from all that negativity. And the reality is that most of it is unsubstantiated. And if they don't mention real studies, which they don't, then it's not worth it. And people come along with real studies, independent studies. Just using vaccine as an example, there's 60 studies at least that Kennedy, the one that's really an advocate for it, he shows that kids that don't get vaccines are far healthier than people that do. 60 different studies. They've never even ran a study.
I know.
So it's a little frightening to think we're basically turning over our health to money, to people controlling the money instead of people caring about our health. And I'm not for or against,
Yeah, neither one of us are. I think that I think we both want the same thing. And you have lived your entire life, most of your life, realizing the importance of being a free thinker, of being of seeing that things need to make sense for the brain, or if not, it shuts down. Right. Look at dementia. I can't do this anymore. I'm going to shut it down. And if we're told what to think, how to think all the time, and classes like this are not as popular as someone, falling down and bumping their head and being like the Roadrunner and Coyote. Those are the things that gravitate, like it stimulates people, but they're not learning and growing. Right. Yesterday, Dr. Porter, we had a woman named Michelle Sullivan, and she is a little person who was born with a rare form of dwarfism where her hips didn't dysplasia, some form of dysplasia. And she decided a long time, she's only 4 feet tall. And she decided that even though her physical body would not grow, that the only way she could live in this society is if she grew internally. What would this world be like if we all had that philosophy?
That'd be wonderful, yeah. I think everybody has the potential. It's just activating that, so that's what part of my job is, when somebody says, why do I do this? Well, I needed the help myself and my family did, and I saw how it worked. And then of course you want to share that. So I've been doing that. I mean, this was something I did as my hobby before I started making a living at it. So it feels like every day I get up and get to do my hobby. So that's why I do it.
And I am honored that I am part of this quote unquote
Yeah.
hobby. There's more to this headset, but I want to encourage everybody to try it. Go there right now, declare that this will help just about everything that has to do with the mind, because this is where everything begins. And if you want to rewrite it, so look, and the way you use this is once you, and real quick, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, Patrick. So I just want to see if I can show this. And correct me if I'm wrong, because this is what I've been doing, because I think I learned this. I was doing it incorrectly the first time. So you see, this is the brain tap for the brain tap retreat, which was created just for people with the coronavirus or for the fear or anxiety. So this is like a little retreat. There's the first one, and you go all the way down, and you do them one at a time. So one, then you go to two, then you go to three, then you go to four, go all the way through. Then because
we should tell, that's why you
Yes.
build the neuroplasticity. If you do the same one every time, when somebody says, why do you have 1,000 sessions? You need enough that every time you do it, at least maybe you can go back to that one maybe in 2 or 3 weeks. But if your brain keeps doing something different, each one of our encodings are different because the brain likes change. It doesn't at first. It's just like exercise. But once you get into the habit of exercise, we love it because we get that chemical payoff, from doing it. We start to feel good. The same thing's true with meditation and relaxation techniques. It's just, this is going to do it for you. So even with your headsets, when you go to your site and they get that download, it's going to start to work with them to train their brain. And if it works on the auditory way for you, which it does most of our people, around the world, we're in 120 countries. So they're not all using the headset because we can't ship into some of those countries. The key is it's about practice and getting the brain to change. And our brain is very adaptive, but if we don't change, and being in the house, just one more thing, if you're in the house, you need to get out and go walking or whatever. Your air in your home, unless you have air purifiers like we do, is about 200 times more toxic than the air outside.
I know.
And that's the same thing like wearing a mask. You want to get new air. Like we're lucky here in North Carolina right now. We can have the windows open, during the day and get some fresh air in. I can get out of my boat and go to the river, the ocean, and you get fresh air and sunshine. I mean, we're designed to be outside, but that's not the kind of world we live in now. I'm sure
we've been domesticated like
Yes.
the animals. Yes. We've been domesticated. And so that is, it's our turn. It's our turn to say, okay, I know that this is what they're telling us, but we need to verify everything that they've asked us to do to fight the coronavirus. Anything that's negative, it's just not good for us. I remember, was it Mother Teresa, that they asked her if they would go up to walk against, a
war thing, yeah.
Yeah, against war. And she said, no, I will not march against war. I will march for peace. So we need to look at what we want. And so just verify. Del Bigtree is one that I've been promoting the heck out of him. I love him. The High Wire with Del Bigtree. Not only do you get the information, but you get the information, you know where to go. You can go and check it and confirm the information is correct. And so I can't say it enough that there's a lot of misinformation out there, and the misinformation that's being labeled misinformation on Facebook and YouTube and social media is actually true. And that's the question. What if everything we believe was false? And what everything we believe was false was true? And that's why it's so important to be curious and instead of critical, and just be open to learning something more. Just like Michelle Sullivan was saying yesterday so beautifully, we're done growing on the outside, but and many people who are hurting, we don't even know that they're hurting because it's on the inside. Right. And so we need to develop that muscle, that inside muscle, and our brain muscle, which is so powerful, Patrick. What you've created here is just so invaluable. Everybody should have that's my vision, is that everybody has a headset, or that everybody downloads the app. But first you have to, when you go onto the website to whenyouneedafriend.com, please click on that. Get that app that way. Get it that way. That's the way you want to do it. There's just so many different ways that.
Yeah, and I should say, in order to get the bundles you're talking about,
Yeah.
don't buy it through the App Store, because
Yeah,
they have a
you
very
don't.
limited bundle there, because we had to do it. But
Yeah.
we prefer that you buy it directly. That way,
From my website. Yeah.
yes.
So go to whenyouneedafriend.com, go to the shop now bag, right below where you subscribe, but make sure you subscribe if you haven't done so. And then just click on it and it'll take you straight to the store. That's where you can download it. And then you'll have everything for you to get started. 15 days. And I believe that if you decide that you want to do 45 days, that's 99 cents. But remember, if you don't want to do it more than 45 days, then just make sure you put a ticker and then you get out of it, or you just decide that you want to continue doing that and pay for the app. This is just an amazing tool. It's life-changing.
Yeah.
It's life-changing.
Our average user, for the person out there wondering, they use it 28 times a month, our average user. So they use it. We only have, if somebody owns the headset, we have a 1% churn. If they don't have the headset, it's about 38%, which means that most people stick with it. I mean, that's unheard of in this field when we get our standards. I need to jump off here in a minute, but I want to let your listeners know, if they go to BrainTap Tech on Facebook, the Facebook/BrainTap Tech, I'm going to be doing a live meditation at 7:00.
Okay.
I do that every Wednesday night at 7:00. We take a subject. Today our meditation is about putting future events into perspective. And we're really trying to get people to move out of that infinite now experience and put some timelines to their life. So our brain loves to know that. It's even like when we were kids, if dad or mom said, if we said, where are we going? They go down the road, they get all upset and angry. But if with my son, I gave him a map and I showed him how to read it, and he would tick off the cities. He never bugged me again. And he can read a map really well now, because we traveled a lot during a book tour and he was just so bored, until he learned how to read a map. And I think people need to get their own maps and figure out where they're going. So that's something they can do tonight if they want to have a little bit of experience.
And that's BrainTap Tech?
Yeah. It'll also be it might be on mine as well, but go to BrainTaps, because that's the one we launch it from. It's a live just like this. We'll do it on Instagram too, but we do a Facebook Live at the same time. So
Very good.
They can get a little flavor of what we're talking about. Go and download the app from your website, and then we'll be able to teach you a little bit more, but everyone's invited. It's open to anybody.
Wonderful. Good to know, because it's nice to be able to enjoy meditation by some live meditation live. But you got him here in your head. You can get him here all the 1,000 meditations. Thank you so much, Patrick, for sharing. Let's get you back to talk about the heart and the brain and how we can regulate our brain through the BrainTap. So Thank you so much. Thank you all for watching today. I really do appreciate you. We'll see you tomorrow at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. We got a lot of giveaways tomorrow.